Gonzaga University President Dr. Thayne McCulloh joins the show to take us behind the scenes of Gonzaga joining the Pac-12, plus his decision to retire at the end of the year and Gonzaga's future.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, it's a very special edition of the Locked On Zags podcast today. Gonzaga President Dr. Thayne McCulloh joins the show talking all about Gonzaga's move to the Pac-12, how that came together, also addresses the previous rumors about the Big 12 and the Big East, where Gonzaga stood in those conversations. We talk about that. We talk about his tenure as the president for the last 15 years and his decision to step down at the end of this year. We also talk about the WCC, Gonzaga's win over Baylor, all sorts of fun stuff. A really fun interview. Looking forward to you guys getting a chance to check it out right here. Well, I'm incredibly thrilled and honored to be joined today by Gonzaga University President Dr. Thayne McCulloh, here to talk about Gonzaga's move to the Pac-12, some recent developments on campus, his departure at the end of this upcoming academic year, and more. Dr. McCulloh, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. I really appreciate having your insight, having your expertise, having you on the podcast.
Well, thank you. And I'm excited to be here and thrilled that you asked me. So thank you.
Let's start with Gonzaga's move to the Pac-12. Obviously, something we've been hearing about for a while. Conference realignment has been a topic for Gonzaga for close to a half decade now. The Mountain West was rumored of 6 or 7 years ago. The Big 12 has been an off and on rumor for a couple of years. We'd heard some rumblings about the Big East, but then the Pac-12 makes this sudden move to add these 4 schools from the Mountain West. They also add Utah State. And then the kind of move after that for Gonzaga felt like it came together fairly quickly. From your perspective behind the scenes, kind of when did the Pac-12 really start to emerge as a serious contender for Gonzaga University, and how did it all come together?
Well, it's it's kind of an interesting story, actually, because really, as you've indicated, our first real foray into the question of whether or not we ought to consider moving to a different conference was following the 2017 national title game. And we were asked by the Mountain West at that point if we'd like to explore it. And initially we were open, but we also have been really transparent about these explorations with our own conference, with the commissioner and so forth. That doesn't mean everybody's been happy, but it has been important to us to be good partners with our conference schools. So after the 21 national title game, we began to really consider the question of what is the future of college athletics. A lot of the issues that most institutions and all conferences are facing are ones that we too are challenged with, and also constitute in some cases opportunities that we'd like to expand upon and really seize upon. We actually think it's important that we delve deeply and commit ourselves to things like exploring the full impact and opportunity for student athletes as regards NIL. But without question, the various evolutions are costly and they require investment. And so how does our conference, relate to that world? And so what we did is we actually decided that we really needed to undertake a study and examine these questions in a more sort of, certainly invitations were coming, but we also wanted to do the work and to lean in and figure out, well, what are the options, and also what are the things that we just don't want to do or are non-starters for us. So that's when all the discussions about Big 12 and all of that really started to happen. And as a result of that work, I feel we were really well positioned to know what an opportunity that was viable looked like. I did have some conversations internally with folks in athletics, coaches as well. And before the Pac-12 evolved, we always sort of considered the Pac-12 to be a preferred possibility, because the West Coast is our home and the impact on travel and all those kinds of things. So these are two-way deals, and people want to invite you and want to have you, and so that wasn't the reality then. But this whole thing actually, in some cases, came together quite quickly. And yet at the same time, had we not done this earlier work, I don't think we would have been able to respond quickly. So it was a both and we really knew going into the discussions what it was that we needed to see in order for us to feel like it was going to provide a viable option.
One of the things that struck me that you kind of mentioned already, the Pac-12 always felt like the goal, and the previous iteration of the Pac-12 was, we'll say, stingy about allowing schools that they didn't feel fit their kind of goals. But Boise State was a school that had a lot of kind of people who felt like they should be there, but they didn't end up getting there, BYU, and some others. And Gonzaga kind of felt like a school that wasn't getting that attention from the Pac-12. But then obviously we know what happens to the Pac-12 and the kind of dissolvement of the conference, or at least the previous iteration of the conference. And now that it's back, and obviously you have two former, longtime institutions in Oregon State and Washington State, and now you have a group of schools kind of from that Mountain West that Gonzaga seriously considered back, after the 2017 season. What has kind of been the impression that you've had and others who are, kind of in these conversations, administrators, coaches, et cetera, knowing that, it's the Pac-12, it's the Pac-12 brand, it's the Pac-12 logo and to an extent history, but it's also a different looking Pac-12, and a Pac-12 that in some ways is more inclusive, is more accepting of maybe thinking outside the box and adding a program like Gonzaga that does not have a football team, which was almost certainly, I imagine, a insurmountable hurdle to the previous Pac-12. How does it kind of feel to be joining a conference that definitely doesn't look the same as it has for 100 years prior to this this kind of change, but still kind of carries that cachet as being the conference on the Pacific Coast?
Well, I mean, it's a very interesting circumstance, because I think what we really have is a conference that's creating itself anew. And while I think it has been an impediment to most of the schools in several of the conferences that we've been talking to over time, that we don't have a football program, and the world of the media contracts related to football programs, and the dominance of football in sort of the American sports psyche have made it historically very, very difficult for many of these schools and their athletic programs to seriously consider a school as being on par. It just didn't make sense. To these members, it did make sense, and it made sense because what they understand is that there's an opportunity to think about building a new conference that thinks about its relationship to the world of sports, to the American sort of landscape as it continues to evolve, and to what its membership considers its obligations to student athletes in a new way. And frankly, if I could say this, I think that the Gonzaga athletic programs are the envy of many institutions. We have excellent student athletes who actually work very hard academically, and their grades show it. They're across a diverse number of academic, studies, and they work hard across the board. They work really, really seriously with faculty who want them to be successful, and staff and coaches and everybody who understand that the sort of traditional scholar athlete model is still very much alive and well at Gonzaga. And some of, even the large state institutions are jealous when they look at our success rates, when they look at our graduation rates, when they look at that in combination with our athletic success as well. And so they want to understand what we're doing. And a lot of it begins with attitude and prioritization, and also kind of remaining very humble and knowing what you're good at and knowing what you still have to work on. And I'm very grateful because some of the conversations we've had with the new Pac-12 presidents have really underscored how seriously they take the work, not only as members of an athletic conference, but as members of a university community. And we've been talking about what are some of the academic opportunities, what are some of the partnerships that we could create, what are some of the pipeline programs for student athletes, but also more broadly for faculty and students generally. And it's very clear that they see Gonzaga as a valuable brand athletically, but also a valuable brand in the university atmosphere.
Dr. McCullough discusses Gonzaga leaving the WCC, the relationship built between the school and conference over the past 40 plus years, and how the Zags helped the WCC in a whole lot of ways. All that coming up in just a second. But first, fellas, sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously, and you always want to be ready. HIMSS provides access to treatments that can help give you the boost of confidence so you'll be ready whenever the mood strikes. HIMSS is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits, and if prescribed, the medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, HIMSS can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Today's episode is also sponsored by ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink, which is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break down this byproduct. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how to use it. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly, pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. You touched on some of this a little bit already, but with regards to the rumors that we had heard, obviously more rumors about the Big 12 and some what appeared to be some momentum at times towards that conference, and then more kind of smatterings of rumors regarding the Big East Conference. And obviously, we know that football seems to be a hurdle and was likely a factor with regards to the Big 12. And I imagine, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I imagine that the Big East travel was a significant challenge with regards to considering that conference, either from Gonzaga's perspective or perhaps from the Big East perspective as well, because institutionally it feels like a lot of those universities are very similar to Gonzaga, but the closest campus was over like 1,100 miles away, so that just would have been a challenge. But with the move to the Pac-12, was that kind of made in part with the knowledge that the likelihood of something materializing in the future with the Big 12 or the Big East was fairly minimal just because of those hurdles?
Well, I think that it's important to say that in my conversations with primarily university presidents and commissioner level colleagues, people have been a very positive and encouraging, and I mean, it's been honestly super amazing to see the amount of interest that Gonzaga brings. And I think, some of it, honestly, I realize it sort of is viewed from a commercial perspective. Sure. Like if you're looking for a Pacific or West Coast time zone, presence and viewership, then Gonzaga makes a lot of sense to a conference that may not have that or may not have that in great measure. But geography is significant. And, if you're playing a school like West Virginia, for example, and the expectation for us, one of the issues for us was we really couldn't imagine contemplating joining a conference in basketball only. We really needed to find a conference that would support all of our sports, or as many of the sponsored sports as we could manage. And so tennis and golf and, soccer and some of the other sports that are not perhaps viewed by as many people, but still are super important to us and super important to the member institutions. We just had a very difficult time figuring out how are we going to imagine traveling and not compromising some of the other things that are super important, like academic class time and so on. So yeah, geography played a huge role in that. And at the same time, so did the willingness to take all of our sports, or again, as many as we can bring into a given conference. And so absolutely being able to largely remain in the West at this point, and the study that we had done to look at different conferences and the travel impact issue helped us to understand that we already do travel a fair amount, just being in Spokane relative to other West Coast conference schools. But so it wasn't completely insurmountable to imagine some of the sort of broader West regional possibilities. But certainly the Pac-12, I think, that impact is much more ideal.
The WCC is Gonzaga's home still, and was for an incredibly long time, a conference that has been good to Gonzaga. I know there's some fans who have long clamored for Gonzaga to be in a different conference, and some folks who are maybe more casual fans of the sport who feel that the WCC has held Gonzaga back, which I've long lamented is a pretty ridiculous opinion. But we've seen the WCC really be a partner with Gonzaga and work with them and have this really fruitful partnership for decades. How difficult was it to make the decision to leave a conference that has been affiliated with the university for decades, knowing that it was going to have a fairly significant impact on the league and the conference as a whole?
Well, probably a fairly predictable response. This may sound like, but I do mean it authentically. I've enjoyed very much the relationships that we've cultivated and developed with the West Coast Conference, and the West Coast Conference has been good to Gonzaga. It's created tremendous opportunity for us across sports, and we've taken our membership seriously, and we've always tried to make decisions that are both in the best interest of the university and the conference. And I have repeatedly tried to frame things in that way. We I, as a university president, my first allegiance is to my own institution. But when you're a member of a conference, an athletic conference, where there's so much power and impact that happens as a function of sport and media and so forth, you also recognize that it can be a both and in most cases. So emotionally, it's hard because you develop relationships with people and you see them and you become friends and you find maybe other opportunities to collaborate too. And the West Coast Conference presidents don't only travel in the West Coast Conference circle, they're also members of other organizations where we see one another. So we enjoy that. So to a certain degree, it has been difficult, but I would also say, I think it's fair to say we see Gonzaga as having been very good to the West Coast Conference as well. And, particularly given what the financial model has been, which has been largely based on earning men's basketball units, Gonzaga has been the breadwinner in most respects, I think fairly said, for a long period of time. And so I think there's some natural unhappiness that we have departed because this construct has worked pretty well for everybody. But as I mentioned earlier, I've been very upfront with my colleagues about the fact that both we really feel like it's important to be upfront with our colleagues about what we're doing, but also I have shared with them, look, if you were in our situation and you were facing some of the both opportunities and challenges that we do, trying to maintain and build elite programs, you would be doing the same thing. You would be looking at, okay, are there opportunities? If there are, where are they? What are the downsides, the upsides, and so forth? So I think it's fair as well to say that not everyone has the great fortune and opportunity that Gonzaga has, and that can breed a little bit of resentment. But for the most part, I think people have understood, and because we've tried to be really upfront about it, I think nobody's sat and said, "Well, look, they didn't tell us" or anything like that. We've tried to be very transparent. So I think that has stood us in good stead.
Switching gears a little bit, you announced over the summer your intention to retire at the end of this academic school year. Obviously, this came out before the move to the Pac-12 and before conference realignment had been finalized for the university. But I am curious, after 15 years as the university president and a long career at Gonzaga prior to that, kind of what prompted the decision to make the move at this time and to step away from Gonzaga at the end of this academic year?
Well, it's a number of different factors, but one of them is that I really subscribe to the theory that organizations benefit from change and renewal. And prior to the pandemic, I had been actually beginning to wonder, what's an ideal term, for somebody, and I began doing some reading, and most of the sort of Harvard Business Review type articles would tell you, 10 years is probably optimal, that CEOs or leaders of organizations tend to peak, and beyond that point, you almost start to see a predictable degradation in their ability to do the work in the way that they might have during that first 10 years. Now, there probably are exceptions, but that was kind of what we saw. And I reached that point right about just before we got to the pandemic, and actually was beginning to talk with the board about, are you getting tired of me? I mean, I'm trying to do as well as we can, but there's a natural pause point here. Maybe we should talk about it. And they're like, no, this is great. Keep going. And then, of course, the pandemic did hit. And in some ways, I was really grateful that I had stayed, because I've grown up at Gonzaga and I know so many people who work at Gonzaga, and I've worked with so many colleagues that being able to work together and mobilize our response and try to figure out how to put ourselves back together in the context of COVID was, I think, made more possible by virtue of all these rich relationships and commitments that we had all made to one another. But I do think that there is a point at which it's time to yield to another person the opportunity and to let them, work to fill the leadership and to work with colleagues in the community and see where they can take it. I think every president goes into a university leadership position in the hope and with the aspiration that they're going to leave the place in a better position than they found it. I came in as we were winding our way out of the financial crisis of '08, and there wasn't anywhere to go but up, actually. But there were some perils that we had to face and overcome at that particular time. And I'm very proud of the work we were able to do then, and then the building that we've been able to do, both literally and figuratively, as we've tried to work to increase the profile and the viability of the institution. But I think there is a natural point at which, it's probably a good idea to let somebody else, have a turn. And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and I'm thankful. My wife and I will mark what will be 32 years of continuous work together at Gonzaga. Be about 35 end to end for me, and it's been a great run.
Dr. McCullough and I close out the show discussing the start to this epic final season for him as the president at Gonzaga. We're going to talk about why he's hoping and optimistic that a national championship will be in the cards before he calls it a career at the end of the year. All that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, let's talk about game time, because going to live events, it's the absolute best. Whether it's comedy shows, musical theater, concerts, and of course, college sports are back. The basketball season is here. Football's still in full swing, and I'm looking forward to making a bunch of new memories this season. And great news, when you're trying to get your tickets for this year, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so that you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Right now, you can get tickets for Gonzaga versus Kentucky at the Climate Pledge Arena. They remain on sale. 2 tickets in the upper deck are $65 a piece. That's a really good deal to see the Zags take on this Mark Pope Kentucky team. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. I told you this prior to the recording, but I started as a student at Gonzaga during your first year as the president. So my kind of Gonzaga experience has really mirrored that growth that you spoke about. And sure, you can say, oh yeah, we had nowhere to go but up because of where the world was at in 2009. But the growth that this university has gone through, I mean, new facilities for athletics in many ways. We have the new student center, which I know is not that new anymore, but was not there when I was there. The Volcar Center, the health partnership with UW. Like, there's so many things that we have seen that have really grown the profile of this university, have grown the campus life, have really excelled as a university in a time where in a lot of places higher education is struggling in many ways. And to see this school continue to grow and thrive and push the edge and do things that are, that schools like Gonzaga aren't making partnerships with, the health partnership, like with UW. Like, these are things that are new, and the athletic facilities are so outstanding for a school with Gonzaga's student population. And you kind of touched on some of the pride that you feel in what has happened over the last 15 years. But I wonder if you could expand on any of maybe your favorite things that have been accomplished in this last decade and a half at Gonzaga with regards to just the growth of the school.
Yeah, there's just I think, if I were to sum it all up, I would just say when I went to Gonzaga, because I also share with you the experience of being a student and now an alum. Gonzaga was not nearly as well known. It was not nearly as large. It was kind of considered a good school. But really, I think what I always felt about Gonzaga is that there were actually great things happening, and there were great people who were graduating and going on and doing amazing things. It wasn't just good. It was actually quite phenomenal. And we have a long track record of graduating alums who are doing phenomenal things, doing things that I think are making an impact, and they're making a difference, and they're doing it. We discover on a monthly basis just the incredible span and reach of what people are out there accomplishing. And many of them do credit to some degree their experience at Gonzaga, helping them build the platform or whatever it may be. We got lots of alumni at very well-known organizations like Microsoft and Google and Salesforce and other places, but we also have people scattered all over the world, and they're doing incredible stuff in places nobody's heard of. And it's fascinating to hear from people and to know what they're doing. But I really felt like the challenge was to actually mirror these accomplishments in the way that the university saw itself, that we were way more capable. And if we just raised our expectations for ourselves and really kind of grew into an understanding of who we were becoming, it was almost limitless what we could accomplish. And I will tell you this, I know it's probably, just the thing you would expect on a podcast like yours, but I want that national championship this year.
Yeah.
I think that there is real potential. I think that I saw that Joe Lenardi has us as a 1 seed, at the beginning of this very long season that we have to undertake. But the expectations are always super high at the beginning. I think sometimes high expectations is what motivates you to greatness too. I think, sure, you may be setting yourself up for a fall, but I have immense expectations for Gonzaga, and I really have always tried to challenge myself to say, but why can't we? Why can't we do something that's a little bit out of scale? Whether we actually get there or not sometimes is less important than the fact that we grow in our belief about what we can be. And all of that is rooted in one important concept. I actually do think that the nation benefits from places like Gonzaga. And I'm sad that the nation has not remained as committed to higher education and to sustaining these organizations as it once was, because the truth is people have become concerned, and in some cases justifiably, about whether this is viable, whether this is this concern, this way of doing things is any longer, realistic because of things like cost and so forth. Yeah. There are countries today that completely subsidize higher education for their citizens. Norway would be one. You say, yeah, but it's a lot smaller of a country. Yeah, but its GDP is a lot smaller too. They're making a priority to make education accessible and affordable. Right. And I am hopeful that at some point down the road, people will return to a place maybe with fewer colleges, in measure, but still believing and understanding just how important giving people the opportunity to expand their capacity and develop their abilities is, and how important places like Gonzaga can be in that process. And so I am very excited about both what we've been able to do in so many different ways. But I'm also excited about the future, because I think Gonzaga has a bright future. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's never not been a lot of work. I mean, that's just the way it is. But I just can't even begin to tell you how many things I'm proud of and that I'm excited about for Gonzaga.
You said it perfectly, and I think it's such a great encapsulation of Gonzaga's spirit to take a school that nobody thought could. Okay, they made a nice run 25 years ago, and then they made it a few more years, and it's like nobody thought they could sustain that, and then they did, and nobody thought they could break through and become a consistent, top tier seed, and then they did, and nobody thought they could make a national championship game, and then they did, and they've just continued to break the barriers on the men's basketball side, but not just there. I don't think people expected that the women's basketball team could, have a similar amount of success, and they did under Coach Kelly Graves. And then he leaves, and people thought, okay, well, this, when a great coach leaves, that's usually the end of a smaller school having success. And then Lisa Fortier takes over, and the program reaches new heights as they have. And you see a baseball team that has had tremendous success, has multiple players in the major leagues. You've seen soccer, reaching new heights very recently. Cross country, track and field was a program that, had been kind of not near the top of the standings in the WCC very often, but now has been excellent in that area. And it's just, it kind of mirrors that idea of why can't it be us? Like, there's nothing preventing us from reaching that goal and reaching that threshold and then maintaining it and staying at that level. And I think that really is what makes this university so special. It's what makes the fan base so passionate and dedicated about this school, is they know that we have coaches and administrators and student athletes and everybody who believes in this school, who believed in Mark Few taking over for Dan Munson 25 years ago, who believed that this school could succeed despite so many other smaller schools not sustaining that success. And I think that just really highlights what is so special about this school. And the last question I really want to ask you is looking forward, and specifically for this year. We record this here, really just feels like a few hours after Gonzaga's huge win on the men's basketball side over the Baylor Bears, and we're recording before the women's team gets going against Montana Tuesday evening. But it feels like it's about to be a great year. And there's nothing I could think of that would be better to send you out of your time as the school's president than a national championship. And this team sure looked ready to do it this year. How excited are you for the winter sports? There's a great fall season still going for some of the sports, but feels like it's shaping up to be another fantastic athletic year here for the Gonzaga Bulldogs.
No, I agree completely. And one of the great things about athletics, at an institution like Gonzaga, as well as much larger and even much smaller schools, is it really does bring people together. Mm-hmm. I mean, you had asked earlier about a favorite memory. One of my favorite memories was actually being at the Final Four in 2017. After our win against South Carolina, mm-hmm. because there were so many Zags that were gathered together in Tempe, and it was an electrifying experience. And when you've never ever been someplace like that before, you've never quite scaled those heights before, you recognize that you're in very rare air. And it's so exciting, right? Never again. Even though we went back, mm-hmm. it wasn't the same for a lot of reasons because of COVID and all that. But I think even if COVID hadn't happened, it wouldn't have been quite the same, because it'd be like, well, we've been here before, But I think that there's the downside of but then we get really used to things. I mean, mm-hmm. It wasn't until 2013, which I will mention was early in my tenure, mm-hmm. that we were for the first year ranked number one on the men's basketball side in the country. The first time. That was in the wake of celebrating our 125th anniversary. There was a lot of energy and a lot of attention that we had created around Gonzaga and the program. And so I recognize some of that may feel like hype, but mm-hmm. these kinds of experiences draw people together, and then they kind of renew their commitment in some ways to their institution by virtue of that. So, absolutely celebrating even individual student athletes with their incredible accomplishments, as we've seen. You mentioned cross country and track, and we have some amazing student athletes who are competing now at the national level in a sport that I know the coaches have been working hard for years to try to get. But absolutely, I am very excited about the possibilities across the array of sports, and I'm excited about the galvanizing impact that can have for the institution, because I do hope that one other thing is true too, that we remain humble and that we do not take for granted who we are and the special place that it is, because I think it's actually fairly easy to lose that. Yeah. And I hope that we never do.
Dr. Thayne McCulloh, thank you so much for coming on the show. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast to talk about these experiences, your tenure as the president of the university, of course, the move to the Pac-12, all of that. It is incredibly appreciated, and I look forward to watching the rest of the athletics season here in your final year, and hopefully it's going to be as good as we're hoping that it will be. So thank you again.
Well, and thank you for having me on, and thanks for all the great work you do. I'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Well, once again, a huge thank you to Dr. Thayne McCulloh for coming on the show. I was so excited to get an opportunity to talk to him about Gonzaga's move to the Pac-12, his final tenure, his final year here as the president of the university. Was an incredibly fun interview. I hope you all enjoyed it. We got more fun stuff coming your way later this week. We're going to have the final of our season preview episodes talking about every player on Gonzaga's roster. We're going to combine a few guys who we haven't talked about yet into an episode on Thursday, and then we're going to get ready for that game against Arizona State, the second Big 12 opponent Gonzaga faces in the first week of the season. That game on Sunday. We'll have a full preview of the Sun Devils on Friday's show. And then next week, we'll get you ready for San Diego State. We'll keep you up to date on recruiting, any more conference realignment news that we hear, and of course, getting you ready for Long Beach State, San Diego State, Battle for Atlantis, all the fun stuff coming up here in the future. Thanks again for listening, folks. And as always, go Zags.